On the frozen world called HFY 7, the nights lasted longer than most people could imagine. Winds howled across wide plains of ice, lifting powdered snow into the air like ghostly curtains that never settled. The stars above were sharp and cold, and even the auroras that rippled green and blue seemed more like a warning than a comfort. For the human settlers who had chosen to live here, survival was a daily act of stubbornness. For the native beings who had walked the ice long before humans came, survival was an ancient tradition written in breath and blood. Inside Outpost Ananke, a ring of linked domes warmed by geothermal power, Dr. Mara Chen adjusted the sensors along the outer wall. She was a xenobiologist, though she often joked that on HFY 7 her work was equal parts scientist, engineer, and janitor. Her hands moved quickly as she calibrated a thermal beacon, her breath fogging inside her helmet. Outside the dome, the temperature was dropping sharply, and her wrist screen blinked a warning. The outpost often faced storms, but this night was different. Something else registered on her sensors, a faint moving heat signature approaching the dome from the eastern ridge. Mara frowned, tapping the side of her helmet to check again. It was not a machine, not a drone. It was alive and very small. She hesitated, remembering the rules. Anything unknown had to stay outside until it was classified. The Deputy Governor, Halden, had made that clear. But the signal grew weaker, staggered, almost fading. Something was out there in the deadly cold, struggling toward them. Mara tightened her jaw, then she heard it. The outer hatch sensor gave a faint chime. Something had reached the door. Through the reinforced glass, Mara saw a shape. It was small, hunched, covered in fur that shimmered faintly under the light. Its ears were long and alert, tipped with frost. In its arms it carried a bundle wrapped in glowing reed-like fibers. With trembling paws, the creature tapped on the glass in a careful rhythm. Mara froze. It wasn't just any creature. It was one of the Aurelie, the fox-like aliens that roamed the ice. Settlers had seen them at a distance, graceful hunters that lived in crystal caverns and sang to the quartz veins under the ground. Some colonists called them animals. Others whispered they might be people. No one had ever spoken directly with one, until now. The Aurelie mother looked straight at Mara. Her eyes glowed faintly, pools of pale amber. Then, with slow care, she lowered the bundle in her arms and held it forward toward the glass. The bundle shifted and a tiny face appeared, a cub no larger than a human toddler with wide, bright eyes and fur glowing faint blue. The mother tapped again, her movements deliberate. The drone Lumen, a floating orb that always followed Mara for language recording, pulsed softly and translated the rhythm. Trade? Heat for small one? Mara's heart clenched. The mother was offering her own child. For a long moment, the wind howled between them. Mara's training, her orders, the rules, they all pressed down on her. But deeper still was something more human, something that had nothing to do with rules. She placed her gloved hand on the glass and whispered, though she knew the Aurelie might not understand. No trade. You both come in. She pressed the emergency override. The airlock hissed and opened. Warm air spilled out, and the Aurelie mother staggered inside, clutching her cub. Mara grabbed a thermal blanket and wrapped it around both of them. The cub gave a faint chirp, pressing into its mother's fur. The mother stared at Mara, bewildered, as if she could not imagine someone refusing the offer. Inside the med bay, Mara worked quickly. She warmed water, brought nutrient gel, and set the blanket's heat to steady. The mother crouched low, curling around her cub protectively. Her fur shimmered with faint patterns of light, pulses that moved like words. Lumen floated closer, recording, decoding. Siva, the translation finally displayed. Child, Mara knelt gently. I'm Mara, she tapped her chest. Mara. Siva blinked, then imitated the gesture. Her paw touched her chest, fur glowing in a pattern. Lumen pulsed. Siva. The connection was fragile, but it was there. Not everyone was pleased. On the comm line, Deputy Governor Halden's voice was sharp. Dr. Chen, what did you do? Non-human organisms are not permitted inside the habitat without quarantine. She is not an organism, Mara shot back. She is a person. She has a name. This is not up for debate. Quarantine protocol exists for a reason. Mara muted the channel. She had no patience for arguments when a mother and child were shivering in front of her. Engineer Ilya Moraz entered, frowning but less stern. You know we don't have extra rations for outsiders. Heating costs are already at the limit. I'll use my own research allotment, Mara said firmly. And I'll recalibrate the geothermal manifold to balance the draw. We can manage, Ilya sighed, but he didn't argue. You always were stubborn. That night, while the storm raged outside, Mara sat with Siva and Keo in the medbay. She offered warm broth. Siva sniffed it, then carefully fed a little to her cub. Keo chirped in delight, eyes brightening. His fur shimmered blue-green, casting faint light on the blanket. Siva's patterns flickered across her body, words that Lumen translated slowly. Cold too long. Heat veins tired. Many small ones. No survive. Mara listened with growing sorrow. The Aurelie survived by singing to quartz veins under the ice that stored warmth. But this winter was harsher than any in memory. The veins had weakened, grown tired. Desperate, some Aurelie had begun leaving offerings at human doors, believing humans could pull heat from stone more strongly. They thought their only hope was to give away their children. Mara shook her head. No trade, she said again, pointing to Siva to Keo, then drawing a circle in the air. Together, share. Siva tilted her head, uncertain. Sharing was not a concept she knew with humans, but she listened. Mara drew a plan on her tablet. Geothermal microtaps, small devices that could gather safe heat from the ground and radiate it. They could be placed near Aurelie caverns. No need to give up, children. Just shared warmth. Siva leaned closer, her whiskers trembling. She touched the screen, her glowing pattern sketching spirals over Mara's design. Her spiral meant home. For the first time that night she smiled, but not everyone agreed. At dawn, the Colony Council held an emergency hearing. Siva and Keo waited behind sterile glass with Mara standing proudly beside them. Lumen displayed language analysis showing syntax depth and metaphor in Siva's speech. She calls me warm hinges, Mara explained. A hinge is small, but it lets a heavy door move. That is metaphor, that is culture. That is personhood, the council murmured. Some were moved. Others, like Halden, frowned. We cannot set precedents. We cannot risk contamination. We cannot afford extra mouths. Mara refused to back down. She presented her design for the warmth nooks, showed heat flow models, and explained how Siva's people knew the ice better than any sensor. They can guide us through safe corridors. Already their knowledge saved our intake valve from freezing. This is not charity, it is survival. Together. The hall was silent. Finally, Halden spoke. We will allow one trial nook. But this does not mean full recognition. It was a crack in the wall, but a crack was enough for light to enter. That night, after the hearing, Mara sat with Siva in the quiet of the dome. She brewed tea, the steam curling like faint auroras. Siva hummed a low note, a lullaby that filled the room with soft vibrations. Keo curled against her, glowing faintly blue. Lumen recorded the song and labeled it, First Shared Warmth, Night 472. Mara thought of the first humans who ever lit a fire, not for themselves, but for someone else. She smiled, knowing that humanity's oldest invention, kindness, was alive here on this frozen world. And as she sat with Siva and Keo, she realized something deeper. This was not the end of a night. It was the beginning of a home. The first warmth nook stood just outside the human dome, half buried in snow. It was a simple device, a curved arch of ceramic and metal that glowed faintly red as it radiated gentle heat into the cold air. To Mara it looked plain, but to Siva and Keo it was like a sunrise in the dark. When Siva stepped under the arch, her whiskers quivered. Her fur shimmered in waves, glowing with colors that spoke of wonder. She placed her paw against the ceramic and gave a soft hum. The arch answered, the heat rising steadily. Little Keo squeaked in delight and curled beneath it, rolling happily as if the warmth was a blanket made of light. 2 more Aurelie appeared that morning. Scouts, their fur streaked with frost, approached slowly. They hesitated, but when they felt the warmth, their tails flicked in relief. One left behind a small gift, a crystal thread woven into a spiral. It pulsed faintly with a song stored inside it. They were saying thank you in their way. Mara smiled. It's working. Even Ilya, who was always practical, nodded with quiet approval. If they can survive near these, they won't leave children at our doors anymore. But not everyone shared the joy. Deputy Governor Halden watched from the observation dome with folded arms. Temporary allowances, he muttered. That's all this is. No treaties. No recognition. The colony cannot afford to get sentimental. Mara heard him but said nothing. She believed the warmth nooks were more than just heaters. They were the first bridges between two peoples. Days passed. The Aurelie began to visit the Nook regularly, resting there during hunts or leaving gifts of crystal threads. Keo often followed Mara and Lumen, curious about every sound and machine. He once tried to mimic the way Mara printed a ceramic piece on her fabricator, pawing at the controls until the drone beeped with alarm. Mara laughed and showed him how to press a harmless button. He chirped happily, proud of himself. Siva watched her child carefully, but for the first time in many long nights, she did not watch with fear. She watched with hope. Yet HFY 7 was never gentle for long. One evening, the sky grew darker than usual. Clouds rolled in thick and heavy, and the auroras disappeared behind the storm. The wind screamed across the plains. Alarms echoed inside Outpost Ananke. A super squall was approaching, stronger than any storm of the season. The outpost sealed its hatches. The warmth nook outside flickered under the first wave of icy dust. Power readings dropped. Mara's wrist screen buzzed with an urgent message. A maintenance crew had been caught outside between domes, trapped in the storm. They won't make it if they try to walk back blind, Ilya said, pale. The storm is too thick. Our scanners can't read the ground. Siva, who had been sitting quietly with Keo, suddenly stiffened. Her ears turned toward the storm, listening. She stood and placed her paw against the wall. Then she sang, a long, low note that vibrated through the dome. Her fur shimmered with dark blue patterns. Through Lumen, her meaning came clear. Safe path, narrow, hidden under ridge. Old song rote Mara understood instantly. The Aurelie had traveled these storms for generations. They knew paths humans could not see. We have to go with her, Mara said. Halden's voice snapped through the comm. Absolutely not. Protocol forbids non-humans in colony operations. Mara's answer was simple. Protocol doesn't matter if people die. She grabbed her suit, clipped Lumen to her shoulder, and turned to Siva. Guide us. Siva nodded, fur glowing with steady light. Together they stepped into the storm. The wind was like a living beast clawing at them, pressing ice against their visors. Visibility was almost zero, but Siva moved with certainty, her ears tilted, her body weaving through the gale. She sang low notes, feeling how the sound bounced off the snowdrifts. Each hum was like a sonar call, mapping the storm in music. Mara followed close, holding a thermal beacon high. The snow swirled so thick she could barely see Siva's glowing fur ahead, but she kept moving. Behind them, two human rescuers stumbled, trusting the Aurelie's path. At last, they found the trapped crew huddled against a ridge. They were half frozen but alive. This way, Mara shouted, though her voice was ripped apart by the storm. Siva pressed her paw to the ridge and sang again. The snow shifted strangely, showing a narrow corridor hidden by drifts. They led everyone through, shielded by the curve of the ridge. Step by step, they returned to the dome. When they finally staggered back inside, covered in frost, the rescued crew broke into relieved laughter. Siva's whiskers trembled as she looked at them, surprised by the sound of joy. Mara laughed too, her breath fogging. They were alive because two peoples had walked together. Halden said nothing, but he could not deny the truth. Rules had bent and no one had broken. The storm passed after 2 days. Life inside the dome slowly returned to normal. But something had changed. The colonists now looked at the Aurelie with new eyes. Some even began leaving warm broth in containers near the hatch at dusk. Children pressed drawings of glowing fox shapes against the glass for Keo to see. A cartoon of him wearing a little hard hat appeared on the cafeteria wall. The Aurelie had stopped leaving children at the doors. Instead, they left songs. But trouble came from above, not the ice. A supply ship arrived carrying food, tools, and a corporate inspector. His job was to check that the colony followed regulations. He studied the warmth nooks with cold eyes. This is unauthorized technology transfer, he said flatly. You are giving unlicensed devices to non-human fauna. This violates corporate protocol. They are not fauna, Mara said firmly. They are people. They have language, culture, metaphor. They saved our crew. The inspector raised an eyebrow. Your evidence is unusual. Policy lags behind, Dr. Chen. Until then, these warmth nooks belong under corporate control. Halden, nervous about supplies, nearly agreed. But Mara saw where that path led. Kindness turned into paperwork, neighbors reduced to resources. She could not allow it. She proposed a bold plan, An open forum was called in the dome hall. Colonists gathered, tense but curious. The inspector stood with his tablet ready to record. Halden watched with wary eyes. Siva stepped forward first. She sang, her fur glowing bright. On the wall, light spirals appeared, drawn by her bioluminescence. Each spiral marked a winter, each one glowing brighter than the last. She showed their history, their memory of storms, their songs that kept them alive. Then she added a new spiral, a fresh mark glowing like dawn. It was the winter of shared warmth. Keo ran forward, chasing Lumen's light, and added a bright dot at the center of the spiral with his tiny paw. The hall filled with soft laughter. Then Mara spoke. She kept her words simple, plain. We came here to survive. But survival is not enough. We are human because we share fire, because we keep each other alive. These beings, our neighbors, do the same. We are stronger together. Their knowledge saved our crew. Our machines saved their children. Our best invention here is not geothermal taps. It is trust, the inspector frowned. Recognition adds liability. It changes the colony's obligations. Before Mara could answer, Ilya stood up. We already carry liability, he said, voice steady. It's called being alive together. The hall erupted in quiet laughter and nods. The mood had shifted. Halden looked around the room. He saw the weary crew who had been rescued, the children with their drawings, the Aurelie mother standing tall beside her cub. At last, he signed the addendum Mara had drafted. The Aurelie of HFY 7 are recognized as neighboring persons. Warmth nooks are community commons. The inspector recorded it, reluctant but unable to stop the tide. Change spread quickly. Warmth nooks appeared in valleys and ridges, each marked with a simple spiral symbol. The Aurelie's word for home, the same spiral Siva had once drawn on Mara's tablet. Colonists and Aurelie began to meet at these nooks, exchanging gifts, songs, and sometimes just silence shared in warmth. A new contact garden was built between two domes. Half of it was human technology, pipes and radiant panels. Half of it was Aurelie craft, crystal threads woven to glow when sung to. Children, human and Aurelie, played tag through the soft steam plumes, laughing together. Mara walked through the garden often. She loved to see Keo chasing Lumen's light, squeaking with joy while human kids cheered. Siva sometimes sat nearby, her tail curled around her, watching with quiet pride. One evening, Mara guided a group of young colonists through the garden. She showed them the glowing spirals, the way the quartz threads sang when touched. Advanced species build tools, she told them, but exceptional ones build trust. That is what makes us strong here. Our best invention is not a machine. It's a promise we keep. Siva placed her paw gently against Mara's wrist, the Aurelie gesture of kinship. Keo bounded forward, laughing, and the whole garden seemed brighter for a moment. The colony was no longer just a human outpost. It was a shared home, and on HFY 7, a world where nights were endless and storms unforgiving, that home was the warmest thing of all. The story of the one cold night when a fox mother offered her child, but a human gave them both a home, was told and retold. It became a reminder, carved into the colony's history, that survival is not only about heat and stone. It is about the fire humans carry in their hearts, the fire they share,